guys are amazing. I thought Julio came up to translate into Spanish everything you were going to say. I got really confused right there. But Matt, these guys are two of the Marines. You know, we've got some others running around here too. It's kind of cool. I was really honored to meet Matt yesterday on Fern Street, and his wife, is it Carrie? Kara. I'm sorry, Kara. And Kara knows Charlene because she works for Coca-Cola. And do you recruit for Coca-Cola? And I hear they're hiring. Is that correct? Okay, depending on the bottler, okay. That's code for don't ask me. talk to Kara about that. But I really have so much respect for Matt. He was in during the time of when the Somalia, all that situation. And he was right there just before Black Hawk Down. And I said, well, was it difficult? And he said, no, it wasn't. It was fine. And it was like, it had to have been one of the most scariest things that anybody would ever have done in their life, running patrols in Somalia and feeding people and trying to keep the warlords from killing everybody. And that was Matt's job. He was 0311. I know. Don't we have respect for that guy? Oh, yeah. You know, and nobody ever mentions it, but see, we understand. There's some people in here that really understand. And we thank God for you and really respect you, Matt. God bless you. So, yeah, honestly. Wow, that's hardcore stuff. So go look at the movie. I asked Matt. I said, "Do you look at the movie and say, man, that's where I was?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I was talking to you have a Venezuelan neighbor. He's actually just visiting his ex-wife and his two daughters. And I said, "Well, what's it like in Venezuela?" He said, "Well, I have a sugar business there." And he said, I had to leave. I had to go to Guatemala. He said, "There's Marines stationed in all the countries around, like Colombia and Brazil and everything." And he says, I've talked to those Marines, and they said in 45 minutes they could take back over the country for the people. 45 minutes. They're not going to do it because we want them to take their own. Didn't we have a Revolutionary War? And then didn't we do it ourselves as Americans, right? Is that the history? Is that how it went? Yeah. But anyway, I thought that was pretty funny, Matt. 45 minutes. I went, yeah, right? You know, that's how things work. Okay, but we don't want them to do that. We want the people to get in there and the Venezuelans and to, right, do it themselves. Okay. Now, we have only been on this book for a year. That's it, just a year and a month. And we're in chapter 4. We might even get through the entire chapter today. We're talking about spiritual growth. We're talking about, and I posed it as a question today. I posed it as a question, who wants to grow, mature, change as a Christian? So we're, at this point, you know, in chapter 4, we're Christians. You know, God, he's told us how we became Christians, how we've changed and what's happened. But there has to be more changes. And so we're doing continue because we just keep running through this. We got to the point where we got to verse 17, and he says, I don't want you to walk or live like you did when you were pre-Christian, before you became a Christian. And he says the way that you lived and the way that you acted and the way you did things was in the futility of your mind. And the word futility just means kind of no purpose, no direction. You're not really hitting a target. You're not really accomplishing anything. Nothing is getting done. Nothing is getting achieved. Nothing is getting accomplished. And it was interesting as I was going through on our Wednesday night study over at the Kubo's over the cafe in Temple Terrace. And we had a bunch of people out for that last week. That was good. We had fun. But we started going through Romans. Now we're doing some apologetic stuff. And come, man, if you just don't have anything to do on Wednesday night, just come there. You're going to learn all kinds of stuff about apologetics. But anyway, I noticed in Romans, when we were going through like the first and second chapters, he used the same term. And he talked about some of the same exact things. So this is the way that Paul's mind worked. So he said that before we became Christians, it was futile. We really didn't have purpose. We thought we had purpose. But really the purpose for the eternal God, we just really didn't have it. And it's good to be purposeful. It's good to have direction. It's good to know, where we're going. By the way, was there anybody in here that went to New Orleans this past week on the mission? Did anybody go? Is there anybody here? You guys went? How'd that go? Did it go well? I'm going to have to, will you get up like next week for a couple of minutes and talk about it? I'll give you a whole week to prepare. Or if you don't want to, you can just tell me how it went and I'll talk for you. I'll just be up here talking. You guys can even stand behind me if you want to. Every time I say something wrong, just give me a little swift, okay? So, but we're glad you guys are back safe and sound. New Orleans is not a safe city, but you probably saw some dangerous things and some not so dangerous things, right? Saw some people come to faith, right? Had fun, all right? Did you eat some jambalaya and all that? It's great, isn't it? Culture's amazing. Did you learn a little Cajun? No? This is the language, right? Matt, you probably know a little Cajun, right? Okay. You're from Louisiana. You just grew up there. There you go. That's awesome. So I'm glad you guys made it back safely. So now notice I put things not in order, not in the order that they are in the Bible. So if you look at the next verse, probably 18 and 19. So Alex, you're going to put those up. Thank you. You notice that they're in a different order. So we start off with darken and understanding. And then he went alienated. But he went alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance. So the ignorance created the alienation. And then he goes, but that's due to the hardness of their hearts. So what I did is I put the order, Paul kind of mixed it up a little bit to kind of show you a progression, the way that he was thinking. But I like things like super literal. So I just put in the progression that he actually gave to us. And so here's what happens. So you got a mind that's just not directed. It's not hitting the target. It's not really going where it should. It's not accomplishing the purpose. It's not accomplishing a purpose in your thinking. It's futile. It just means empty. We were talking Wednesday night that the word in Spanish was vacía, like just vacant. Is that right? Vacía? Vacío? And so it just means like empty, right? Just like kind of like empty. And so the way that this tracks out is people become darkened in their understanding. They want to understand it, but it's just dark. They can't see. It has to do with perception, and they cannot perceive. People have a rough time. This is the way that we were before we became Christians. And the next thing that happens, because we just couldn't see clearly, it seems like there's just a natural progression or digression that our hearts become hard. They become hardened. They don't become sensitive and to things. It's very important for us to stay that way. And then there's an ignorance that sets in, and we saw that the word was agnoia in the Greek, and it means agnostic. And this is where the real danger comes. Because when people start becoming, we think the real danger is atheism. These people are the most deist people that you would ever meet in your life. Or theist people, I should say. Theistic people. They believed in so many gods, they couldn't keep track of them. I'm thinking of one subcontinent area in Asia, they believe in 330 million gods. 330 million gods. I always ask them how they... And their trinity is like, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. And then Shiva is the destroyer god. That's just their little trinity. And then they have 330 million other gods. And Shiva is, because Shirley has done crossing guard a lot for the sheriff's department in the last few years. And she says, oh yeah, I met a cute little boy today. And she said his name was Shiva. And I said, his name was Shiva? That means destroyer god. That's what they named their child. I couldn't. Come here, little Shiva. Wait, whoa, dude. I know. It's just mind-boggling, But again, everybody is loved by God. God wants everybody in His kingdom. There's a way to get there. I mean, I spent a month in India in 1984, and I lost 20 or 30 pounds in 29 days or something like that. I just said, if I had stayed there longer, there would have been nothing to put on the airplane to bring back. Let me put it that way. So agnosticism is the real problem. We don't want to, because a lot of times you talk to people about God and you go, well, what are your beliefs spiritually, or what do you believe about? Well, I'm an agnostic. And what they're saying is, I don't know, but it means more than that. It means I don't know and I don't think it can be known. And then when they become agnostic, then they become alienated from the life of God. So the supernatural power and the information and all the beauty that God can bring into your life, it just gets shut down. It just gets stomped out. The switch just gets turned off. And there's no ability to be able to absorb the great things that the life of God offers, like being able to do things that you could have never done in your own ability, to be prepared for heaven, for eternity, to be able to be the best husband or wife that you could possibly be, to be the best friend that you could possibly be, to bring up children the the way that they need to be brought up. And all these things kind of get that purpose, is that all that life from God, all that rich, those resources, those spiritual resources. After the agnosticism, they just get shut down, and then they become calloused. And then I have side two, because this is for a little bit later. So that reminded me. So after, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and we had a whole bunch of kids in here. I had all my grandkids in here, and of course, we still have one handsome little boy in here this morning. But Grayson, but anyway, we talked about the progression, or the digression is they become calloused. People become calloused. They become agnostic, and because of harden of hearts, their heart becomes hard. Then they become agnostic, and then they are shut off from the life of God. And when that happens, they become callous. And then, all this stuff, all this X-rated behavior starts happening. And it says they become greedy to practice every kind of impurity. And impurity is just a catch-all term that Paul uses for everything that it's so weird we can't even list it in the Bible. There's a lot of weird stuff listed in the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, and weird behavior. As a matter of fact, as we get to chapter 5, he gets a little bit more graphic. And then if you look at Romans chapter 1, he's pretty graphic there. But here right now, he gives us a little space, and he just uses the word impurity. But it just means all that X-rated behavior that everybody falls into, and that maybe some of us did, And we got out of it when we became Christians. We stopped doing X-rated stuff. We moved to PG and then G. It's kind of cool. God's happy. As long as he's happy, hey, that's all. So, but where does this all begin? It all begins with that agnosticism. That I don't know. I don't know that I want to know. Maybe I do. I don't know that it can be known. That's the attitude. All right. So then he pops in with verse 20, and he says, and you can look upstairs too, up here, and he says, but that is not the way you've learned Christ. He said, all this stuff and the stuff that we looked at on the other side, that list of behavior, that list of processes that are dark processes, he says, that's the way you were before, all right? But you're not that way anymore, because you've learned Christ. And I was looking at the word for learn, it's the word matheo. And it's the word for being a disciple. And we said a disciple is an apprentice. If you always wondered, what is a disciple? A disciple is an apprentice. Anybody ever go through an apprenticeship process? We've talked about that. Yeah. So you went through for IT stuff, right? Yeah. And welding too. Yeah, that's a real hands-on apprentice stuff. Anybody else go through any kind of apprenticeship here? I mean, if you've learned anything in life, if you learned how to work a computer, somebody probably apprenticed you in that. It might have been a short apprentice, but you were apprentice. And it's just a more technical concept, more than just learning or being a student. It's just like, it's really specific and intentional. And this whole process of discipleship is really specific and intentional. When God makes disciples, there's a lot of specific and a lot of intentional things going on, a lot of details that need to be covered. We just don't wing it. There's processes, and it's a difficult process, because the root for this word matheo is the word M-A-T-H, and what does that spell? Math. And see, you guys, most of you didn't shudder just then when I said that, but I did. Because I'm afraid. It's great, because I got into college, after I was in the military, and I got, free college, and I pushed towards business in some of these different directions, but I just kept getting shut down on the math. So it was great. It was just God's way of just pushing me right to theology, because I didn't have to know a whole lot of math. I don't think I can even count to 10, to tell you the truth, but it didn't matter, because he just moved me right to theology. And then when I got into that, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I never really liked school very much. I did okay. I didn't really pay attention, didn't bring books home, didn't really like studying. It was just, I just didn't really care for it, to tell you the truth. But then when I started studying theology, man, it was like a passion. It was like I said, this is it. Finally, I'm figuring out how the world works, and who this God is, and what he has for us. And I just loved it, you know. But the discipleship process is a process that's similar to math. For those of us that are terrified of math, we understand. And I always talk about this discipleship process is kind of capsulized in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 2. It's kind of cool. And he uses these two words, to establish and to encourage. So if you want to think, well, what is a discipleship? You know, we ask, you know, well, what does it mean to disciple another? How do you do that? We're commanded to do that. And Jesus came and spoke unto them, saying, all authority is given me in heaven and earth. That means wherever you go as a Christian, you have the right to be there. You have the right to be there to talk about kingdom stuff and to represent God. Because God is authoritative over anything and anybody else. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't find yourself in jail or find yourself beat up or find yourself shot. But you have a right to be there. Because God says that all authority is given me in heaven and in earth. And he says, I want you to make disciples. As you're going and living your life, make disciples. And so this is the process that he's talking about. So as we make those disciples, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to establish people. Sometimes it's translated strengthen. For example, in Romans chapter, I think 1? No. Chapter 1, verses 20 through 21. Both of these terms are there together again. It's kind of cool. He says the same exact two terms. So it must be the theme. It must be the dominant way to look at this. And remember, the word establish, or to be strengthened, it's the word in the Greek steroid. It's where we get our word sterizo. It's where we get our concept of steroid. So when you're discipling another person, what you're doing, you're infusing them with spiritual information. And what you're doing is you're strengthening them. It's almost like you're transferring spiritual steroids to them. You're showing them how to defeat, temptation. You're showing them how to be a better worker at work. You're showing them how to be a better neighbor with your neighbor. How to run to the danger instead of running away from danger. Most people run away from danger. God wants us to run to danger, to help people, to save a life, to protect somebody. You know what I mean? To tell somebody about God. And everybody's fearful of that. But those spiritual steroids, they make us strong. It's actually the word, steroid. And then the word here is parakaleo, and it just means to come alongside and encourage. To encourage, to build up, to stabilize somebody. That's the whole idea of encouragement. So to strengthen and to stabilize. Strengthen and to stabilize. Okay? So that's kind of this discipleship program process, because a lot of times when people say, well, what does it mean to make a disciple? Nobody knows. Well, now you know. You say, well, I'm supposed to help people become stronger, and I'm supposed to help stabilize people. Make them become stronger and help them to stabilize. How do you do that? We have a lot of tools and we have a lot of resources. I mean, I got all kinds of things. I got more stuff here than you have time to read. And I put stuff out on the table out there. For example, this is what we're going over on Wednesday night. It's really fun. I didn't have enough to hand these out. I brought a whole bunch of them, but more people came than I thought. And this is just apologetic information about how to talk with people that are, that just believe in different ways, and how you talk to them about your faith in Christ. And so you can just come up here and after the service is over with, and you can grab those up. And we've got all kinds of things. I've been putting out on the, let's see what's in this one. That's just new member stuff, so if you're interested in that, we have that for you as well. And then this box is full of all kinds of things. Like, here's the good news in Spanish. And here it is in Chinese. And out there on the table, I put in Russian and in Dutch and in French and maybe some other languages. And then here's our discipleship course. How many of you have ever seen this before? I actually wrote this for U.S. Marines at Camp Pendleton, California. Because I was working there. We had opened up, after I got out and I was going to college, we opened up a center where we fed and counseled them. And so I actually wrote this. And then our church started using it out in California. So the Camp Pendleton Marines first, and they loved it. and then the people in the church that I was pastoring out there. And then we took it up to Virginia, and all kinds of the university students just loved it up there. And then we've been using it everywhere, and it's translated into Icelandic, Portuguese, French, Spanish, Swahili, no. But the other day I was actually talking, I mean, I don't have to learn Swahili. Everything's right here on my phone. I'm not kidding. I was talking Swahili the other day with people. The word for repent in Swahili is tubu. And the word for to believe is imini. So I was going, tubu, imini. And I was, I'd never spoken Swahili before in my life. But, yep, that's what I was doing Friday. It was kind of fun. So you have it right here on your phone. Pretty cool, huh? You have that stuff right here on your phone. It's amazing. So God wants us to make disciples. He wants to see people come into the faith. And so here's how to do it. You're to strengthen them, and you're to stabilize people. Strengthen them, stabilize them with spiritual information. And we got all the resources right there. And you can take one of those discipleship courses, and I can get more printed up. And it's like 19 topics, and just goes from everything from how to become a Christian to angels at the end, good and bad, demons. Where are the bad angels, all right? The Marines love that stuff. And the reason why I had to make the course is because I was reaching guys that were in MCD, or Marine Combat Training, MCT, and then School of Infantry, SOI. And so those guys were only going to be there for a few weeks, and then they were going to be gone somewhere in the world. They went through the training, boom, they were gone. So I didn't have a chance to do a lot of follow-up, so I made that course after they became Christians. So it was really great. Had a great opportunity of investing in their lives. Some of them became like chaplains. One of them is like a high naval officer chaplain dude in, what's the big naval base there in Mississippi? It's yeah, it's. But there's a real, it's right where the Mississippi River comes in, I think. No, that's in Louisiana, but there's another bay there, and I can't, after you cross the border. But anyway, there's a really big naval base there, and some of you, if you know your geography, you're doing a better job than I am. But he's like in charge of the whole chaplaincy. And I knew the guy when he was in 0311 going through training. Isn't that awesome? Now he's not that old. He's probably the same age as my kid. It's in the Gulf of Mexico, right? Is that Bay St. Louis? Is that it? That may be it. Yeah. But anyway, so you never know how you like do the discipleship work. You know why? You may be talking to the next Billy Graham. You don't know. You could be talking to the next Billy Graham. That'd be pretty cool, right? I mean, okay. But this isn't the way. But all this stuff that we talked about on the other side in here, it's not the way you've learned Christ. It's not the way you've been discipled. It's not how people have done this into your life and how now we're to do this into another person's life. So how do we disciple a person? Yeah, we establish them. What does that mean? How's that happen? Okay, well, we stabilize them by encouraging them, right? So so that's the second point. How do we establish somebody? How do we strengthen? We strengthen them. And what's the word in the Greek? Yeah, steroids. Yeah. It's like that's what you told me when I first met you. I said, "Boy, you're pretty buffed up, And you went, "Well, yeah, I use steroids sometimes." Do you remember our conversation about that, Rob? I don't know. You kind of forgot that, didn't you? All right, but just remember that's what all the WWE guys do, right? And I hear there's a few baseball players. Yep. That got some home run records and stuff. I heard some of those guys. So just get those spiritual steroids. Figure out what they are. Figure out how to use them. Apply them to your own life, and then pour them into the life of other people that you're helping. Okay. I almost broke my mic thing here. I forgot. Okay. So. And then I love it. Paul's almost sarcastic here because he says, but that's not the way that you've learned Christ, assuming that you've heard about him and were taught in him as the truth is in Jesus. It's almost like he's sarcastic there. He said, this is not the way you've been discipled. You have been discipled, haven't you? Assuming that you've been discipled, assuming that you've heard and you've been taught in Jesus. Has that happened? And he talks about because the truth is in Jesus. And man, you can imagine when the craziness of those cultures 2,000 years ago hit the beauty, like all the excesses and the selfishness and the craziness and the X-rated behavior, when it all hit that life of Christ, the power and the supernatural gift and the forgiveness, you can imagine what kind of explosion took place 2,000 years ago. They say that, in Ephesus, like the worst city 2,000 years ago in Greece. Does anybody know what the worst city was? It had the worst reputation. We have a couple of books of the Bible that are named after it. Take a guess. That's right. Who was that? Said that. Very good. You're exactly right. So they actually made a verb for Corinth, like to Corinthianize. It means to do like really bad stuff. It's like you're a pornographic person. That's what it means. And so the corresponding city was the city of Ephesus for Asia Minor. That was for Greece, but for Asia Minor. One guy, Heraclitus, I don't know whether he was a philosopher, whether he was in medicine or whatever he was, but he wrote about Ephesus and he said, people basically live like animals and they deserve nothing more and nothing less than to be drowned. That's what he said about those people. Can you imagine that? Ephesus, we just think, oh, cute little Ephesus, you can go there today. Turkey and, all the ruins are still there because I've been there. And there's a lot of different stores where you can buy food and stuff for the tourists. And one store says, it has a sign on it that says, real fake watches. I don't know, I didn't know what that was all about, but that's what it says. And but you think, oh, this must have been a nice place. Look, there's amphitheaters and places where they lived and stores and everything. And no, it was just like really, really bad. You wouldn't want to take your kid there. You just wouldn't want to take your children. Let's go to Ephesus today, and just people are naked. You know what I mean? Just, no, we don't, they didn't take they tried to keep their city. They said that there was one street that was so dangerous that all the criminals hung out there, and it was connected right to the temple of Diana. Temple of Diana was like a meteorite, and it fell, and it was kind of in the shape of a woman. So they started worshiping a god called Diana or Artemis, depending with your Rome or Greek. And then then there were all the temple prostitutes and things like that, all surrounding the whole worship. So it was really, really like evil stuff, really crazy stuff. And he says, you've been pulled out of all that. And he says, let me read to you, or I probably have it up here. Let's look at the Acts passage, Alex, if you have that up there. Look what happened when Ephesus collided with Jesus. He says, and also many of those who were now believers came confessing and divulging their practices. So when Paul was operating and leading people to Christ there in Ephesus, he's writing them this letter now, and he's saying, people just started dropping all the magical, they had all kinds of sorcery and magic and things like that, and they had all kinds of books and codexes and things like that. And he said they just started getting rid of that stuff. Go ahead, continue on there. 19 says what? And a number of those who had practiced magic arts brought their books together and burned them in the sight. So these were these scrolls and these codexes that had to do with their magical beliefs in the temple goddess Diana or Artemis, and it says they burned them in the sight of all, and they counted the value of them and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. Now, I don't know how many, we don't have any pirates in here, do we? 50,000 pieces of eight, no. Okay, so we don't know how much that is, but I'm thinking if it's $10 per piece of silver or $100 per piece of silver, you can imagine how much that would be worth even in today. And then the next verse says, so they burned up all this very expensive magic art and sorcery and evil stuff. And he said in verse 20, so the word of the Lord continued to increase and prevail mightily. And that's what happened. That's the transition that took place. So Paul went in there and they were like all mad because they said, you're ruining our trade, because they sold idols of Diana, and they would either be silver idols or made out of wood or made out of some other material. And he said, so the merchants were all saying, you're hurting our idol making industry. And everybody got mad. So they have an amphitheater of 25,000. I've been in it. It's still there today. It's pretty well beat up, but it's still there. So 25,000 people rushed in the amphitheater, and they were for for, I think, 2 straight hours or 3 straight hours, all they would say is, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians, great is Diana." You can imagine how crazy these people were. They were just shouting for 2 or 3 hours, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians, great is Diana of the Ephesians." And Paul says, well, I'm going to walk in there and just talk to them. He was the reason why they were so mad, you know. And he had some friends that were already in government that he had led to Christ, and there were some other friends that he was, you know, on his missionary travels with him, and they said, "No, you're not going in there." I mean, this guy's got to be the toughest guy in the world. He was going to walk in to this madness of 25,000 people being really upset about their goddess and their idol-making industry being tampered with and destroyed and diluted because of Paul and his teachings about Christ. And he was going to walk right in there. He didn't say, "Oh, well, they're really mad at me. I think I'll stay away." He said, "They're mad at me. I think I'll walk in there." He was going to walk in there. What would you have done? I can't see myself getting anywhere near that place, right? This guy was amazing, you know? So now, what do we do? Okay, the truth is in Jesus. We've been taught, we've been discipled. The math, the spiritual math has been implemented within our systems. So how do we change? How does this change take place? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about growth. This passage, he starts talking about maturity, and then he talks about stature, and he talks about, what are some of those other words that he uses there in verse, verse 20, maybe 15. He talks about, maybe it's a little higher there. Anyway, he talks about stature, and he talks about fullness, and he talks about measure, and he talks about manhood, or maturity, and he talks about growing. He says you need to grow up, and at the end of verse 16, he says, and you need to grow. He says you need to grow. So he's talking about changing, growing, maturing, becoming different, you know, altering in your life, being transformed in your life. Well, how does that work? How does this? Okay, we see in a general sense the way we were and what needs to be happening in our lives. We're supposed to be disciples now, but what does that really look like? Well, he says, well, it looks like this, verse 22. First thing we need to do is we need to take the old self and we need to begin to put it off, which belongs to the former manner of life. This is the way that we used to live. We used to live like that. Don't live like that anymore, Dave. This is what you learned when you were growing up in Washington, D.C. This is the way all of your friends, most of them are dead now, and this is the way they live, and they've died from AIDS, and they died from shotgun blasts, or 9mm gunshot wounds, and they've died from overdoses of alcohol and overdoses of pills and things like that. And they're all dead. Just about all the friends that I grew up with are dead. And I went in one direction, and they went in another direction. And it says, this is the former manner. This is the way you were taught. This is the way that you were brought up. But he said, but it's corrupt. And that word means waste, to waste away, to be spoiled, or to be ruined. So everything that we were and that we touched, because of the way that we were, and when we touched it, whether it was a marriage, whether it was a parenting, whether it was school, whether it was friendships, whether it was other relationships, it spoiled and became ruined, and because of deceitful desires. And so we had all these ideas about things and all these ambitions, and we said, oh man, if I just go in that direction, all my friends are going in that direction, whole world's going in that direction, all my culture is going in that direction, the whole school where I'm attending is going in that direction, everybody down at work is going in that direction, I'm going to go that way, it's just so awesome, everybody seems like they're having a good time. But the thing is, the Bible says that they're deceitful desires. They're ambitions and their goals and their directions that people go in, but they always offer something, but they never deliver. Ever notice that? Things seem to never deliver. They always offer something, but they don't deliver it. Big talk. You know what I mean? Everything has such a great talk. It's got a great message, you know. Oh man, if you do this, this is what's going to happen to you, you know. And you know, the things of the world around us, it has a great message about what it's going to do for you and how it can benefit you. It just talks big, but delivers very, very little. That's what Paul's talking about here. And he says, just put off that stuff. And so, well, how do we put it off? Well, it's almost like it's a garment. It's like when you become a Christian, you're not putting off your you know, it's not your nature. when you become a Christian, you get a new nature. This is talking about behavior. You put behavior on as a Christian, you put behavior off as a Christian. So all that old behavior, he says, that's how you change. You take the behavior off. Just like, there's stuff in your closet that you will never wear again, right? Because of the way the colors and the style and the way that it looks, or it's ripped up, or it's got stains on it, and, I'm so old now, I can hardly smell anything, but I used to remember if I used to leave things in my closet for too long and then I pull it out, it just didn't smell good. Do you ever notice that? When you leave something in your closet for a long time and you pull it out and you don't wear it for a long time? Or it just comes out of style. It just goes out of style, And there's just things we won't, and God says there's spiritual things, there's behavior that was so important. You thought you looked so good at one time. You walked out, you stepped out of the car, man, and into the Fiesta, and you just wanted everybody to look at you because you looked so good, because you had that favorite shirt, and you had, those favorite kicks or whatever, and you had everything. And now you look at that stuff and say, how could I have ever put that on, right? We all know what we're talking about, right? This is so true. And Paul says, stop wearing that stuff. That stuff is from the old life. It's from the old way. It's from the past. Take that stuff off, leave it off, and where does that, it says, the way that we do this, we get our minds renewed. It's by some changes happening in our minds. Thought renewal. Thought transformation. And we go, Romans 12:2. How's Romans 12:2 go? So I beg you, therefore, brother, by the mercies of God. The second verse goes what? And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed. Then how's it go? By the go. Of your mind. Okay, so extra donut for you back there and also for you, Shirley. I heard you speak up. All right, so the renewing of our mind. We got to get our minds changed. And how do they get changed? They get changed. How does the spirit of our mind become renewed? How do we grow? How do we get changed? We never know. Well, it's by the implementation of this book that we're studying right now. And so there's three ways that he talks about here. He says, 2 Timothy 2:15. He says, be diligent to show yourself approved, a workman which needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So he says, study the word of God. That's a lot of fancy language for just studying systematically the word of God. Get a hermeneutic. Find out what the science of Bible interpretation is. We always talk about hermeneutic over here. It's only a 4 or 5 step historical, grammatical, contextual, and literal. That's it. It's a 4-step hermeneutic. Find out how to study the Bible. Then he goes, anybody know what Psalms 119:9? I'll start off. Your word have I heard. Okay, go. Go ahead, Shirley. You got this. Your word, or thy word, as you would say in the old King Jimmy. Your word have I heard. Your word have I hid in. Go ahead. Okay, great. 2 donuts for you. Okay, so your words have I hid in my heart that I may not sin against you. So the first thing we do is we study it. The second thing we do is we memorize it. And then I wonder what the third step would be in Psalm 63:6. This might be my favorite. Meditate. And you know where you meditate? He says meditate on your bed. So the next time somebody says, you're just lazy, you're always laying around and you're in your bed all the time, just say, dude, I'm meditating. Yeah, that's right. Just, Lacey, that's right. Lacey, all you have to do is just say, you go back and read Psalm 63:6 and just, that's what I'm doing right now. So who are you going to tell that to? Me. Rob. Okay. I'm not going to, I'm staying out of this one. But you can yell at some of the rest of us about that if they give you a rough time. Poor Rob. Okay. Yeah, so 3 things. So what are they again? What do we do with the word here? Study. Grayson, he's so amazing. Okay. Well, Grayson, I'll give you credit. Is it Michelle? Thank you, Michelle. You're paying attention. God bless you. But Grayson, I gave you the credit. You took it. Okay. So study, and then what to do here? Memorize. And then Rob? Yeah, you're going to be hearing about that all the time now. Forever. I'm going to close here. Yeah. So since I'm right there at the end of the board, and it's like 10 after, and I don't want you guys to miss lunch or whatever you got, I'm going to stop right there. It's Psalms 63:6. So those are the three things, Lacey. Just keep those like in your brain, real hardcore. These are the three things, and you've got to be like intentional, specific. You got to plan. Maybe sometimes plan ahead. You know, when am I going to do these things? You know, we know when we meditate. You just wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't go back to bed. You start praying. I'm telling you right now. You're talking about like knockout. You start, if you wake up and you have problems with like insomnia or whatever, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't go back to it. Just start praying and or meditating on things, verses of the Bible that you know. And just before you know it, you'll just be out just like that. Because Satan does not want you. He'll knock you cold. You will be out. You'll wake up and say, hey, what happened to my meditation time, you know? He tampered with it. But this is the way. These are the ways of changing. How do I grow? How do I grow? How do I become different? How do I morph? How do I become transformed? These are the ways that we're talking about here. You got to put off all that old stuff. And then we've got to get our minds changed as we're putting off all the old behavior. Next week we can talk about putting on new behavior, putting off the old behavior. And this is the way to help you put off that old behavior. Okay? It's not rocket science. It's just pretty, you know, easy to understand stuff. But you've got like demons and the evil archangel. You know, we know who the other archangels are, Michael, and we know that they are not doing well right now. Come on, help me. There's two angels there's only three angels that are mentioned by name in the Bible. Gabriel, thank you. Gabor El, mighty God. So Gabriel and Michael, that's right. Somebody had it. Thank you, Dr. Stephanie and Rob. You guys are on it. Okay. And then who's the other archangel? No, that's not mentioned. That's our Catholic thing we got going. Yeah, the Catholics always push that. We love that. But it's not in the Bible. I don't even think it's in the pseudepigraphal or the apocryphal books, but it may be. But it's not in the 66. Okay, so who's the other archangel mentioned in the Bible? Satan. Satan. Those are the three by name. Who's your favorite? Good question, huh? Who do you serve? Lord, thanks for this stuff that we've learned today. It's so practical, so awesome, so wonderful. And it does change us. It makes us different. It makes us strong. It makes us better. It makes us become what you want us to become. We want to become what you want us to become, Lord. And so we just pray that we will not forget these things. We will not forget them. We will be driving in our cars or thinking in the middle of the night or talking with somebody or out on some activity or eating our food. And all of a sudden this stuff just floods our minds and we will be the disciple. We will follow the processes. We will be the changed individual. We will follow the processes. And we will help other people. We'll help them to come into the community of believers. Help them to change, to be different. Thanks for what we learned today, Lord. So good. Such good stuff. Thank you, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.